Welcome to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring you inspiring softball stories, insightful tips from coaches and players, and explore how the game transcends its boundaries to become a metaphor for life. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a casual fan, or someone just looking for inspiration, you're in for a treat. We'll unravel the tales that go beyond the scoreboard. Discover how perseverance and hard work on the field translates into resilience in your daily challenges. Learn about teamwork, leadership, and the unwavering spirit that fuels success, not just in sports, but in the game of life.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Game of Life. Thanks for joining us again. You're just stuck with me and my dad tonight, so no guests tonight, just throwing it back old school with the two of us. But we do have a good topic in store for you tonight that we're looking forward to talking about. So we are going to talk about how to have a good relationship with your coaches. So kind of what that looks like, best practices. I think for me, it's different for every coach that you have. I think going from growing up having a lot of different coaches with a lot of different personalities, a lot of different approaches to now being a coach, I think that sometimes communication can seem like a much bigger mountain than it really is. So I think growing up, one of the biggest things for me was learning how to communicate with the different styles that each of my coaches had and truly learning how to form a relationship with them that was going to be best for both of us. So not really a question, but I'll throw it over to you for some initial thoughts.
I think, as you were saying that, I was writing some stuff down in my head. I think timing might be the biggest thing. Whatever's going right or wrong, or any issue or communication you want to have with a coach, timing's the biggest thing. You don't ask in the bottom of the sixth in a tie game, "Hey, when am I getting in?"
Yeah.
Uh, you don't ask, "Hey, what's wrong with my swing?"
Yeah.
You don't ask my parent, and this goes to parents right after the game. You don't say, "How come my child didn't play?" Or nowadays, "Why did my child play third base when they're a second baseman?" Like
Yeah.
right afterwards. It's 24 hours, some patience, some self-reflection. We talked in the past, even in our car rides home, the 5-minute bitch fest sometimes, just to vent out and get things out before you regroup. And I'm kind of going from the philosophy that when you talk and communicate, there's always an issue, and I don't mean it that way, but if you have bad timing, sometimes legit things you want to communicate seem like issues because it's not the time or place. I
Yeah.
think before practice, I mean, if it's a youth coach, you're not going to have office hours, probably not in high school. In college, you would have office hours, but finding that time you can sit down and have a conversation, the timing of it's everything. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think that just starts from a young age, learning to communicate. And that's on parents too. I mean, I get it when you're 6 or 7, you can't really advocate for yourself yet, and your parents are doing that for you. But as soon as you start to get older, 12, 13, I think you should start to at least dabble in having some of those conversations yourself, right? If you don't agree with something your coach is doing or you're not playing and you genuinely don't see why, ask them. They're adults for the most part. If they're not playing you, they should have a reason and they should be able to explain it to you. So I think one of the biggest things I've seen growing up is immediately girls just start talking to everybody else and create this big issue instead of going to the one person who can control the problem that they're having and say, "Hey, coach, I'm just wondering, why am I not playing in your mind? Like, what is prohibiting you from trusting me out there as a player to be someone who's value add to our team? Because whatever it is, I want to get better at it." If everyone just structured it like that, and I'm making it sound easy, I think everyone would have there'd be less information asymmetry, I like to call it. Like everyone would just be on the same page. But at the same time, if you're going to go ask them that question, you have to be ready for the answer. Just because you ask doesn't mean that you're going to get a good answer. Hopefully, you get an honest one, but I think that's where the conversation starts. And to your point, the timing of that is everything, right? If it's Yeah, you're in a college season and you're in the postseason, probably not the time to ask. If you're in the fall season and you're not getting as much playing time as anybody else, great time to ask because you have the entire winter to work on it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the coach always has the answer that's right. I mean, you mentioned if you're going to ask the question, be prepared for getting the answer you don't want to hear. But sometimes it's because the coach doesn't have the answer. I'd like to think most of the time they do. You know, it's easy to think back to some of the coaches we've come across that you don't feel like there's a rhyme or reason, but at the end of the day, that's for the player and the coach to battle through, not the parent or the coach. The parent needs to support the player, good and bad, despite whatever answer you get or result you get. But I think if you don't learn to communicate, the very first thing you said in the podcast and the very first thing I wrote down, then there's no point in even playing the sport because at some point things aren't going to go your way.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, even being a coach now, I have a lot of respect for a kid who comes up to me themselves and asks them something. Um, I think it's really tough and one of the pet peeves of mine, even seeing high school girls do this, not even just I coach, but everywhere of hey, I came up to you. Sarah's just not really feeling good today. So if she doesn't play well, that's why. Okay, well, why can't Sarah tell me that? And I think, as a coach, I try to pride myself on doing a good job of being approachable and things like that. I tell them all the time, if you do not understand what I'm saying, tell me. If you have a question about something, tell me. If you're confused, tell me. If you don't feel well, tell me. If you're hurting, tell me. And I think there's a lot of coaches out there who are unapproachable that makes it really hard for girls to do that. But to my point, parents out there listening, and I'm lucky I had parents that did this. That's a life skill for that kid to come up to right now, me, a 24-year-old girl. If they can't say it to me, how are they going to say it to their high school coach or their college coach someday? That, hey, I don't feel good. I've had a really off day. I'm dealing with some personal stuff. Because that's just life. You're gonna have days where you're not 100%, but if you can't go to the person that you need to, I don't want to say report to that day, but like you're gonna be in for almost a rude awakening at some point in your life when it needs to happen, and you're gonna let people down or be in trouble.
Yeah, you mentioned approachability. I mean, I've coached for years. I think I'm about as approachable as they come. And I could tell you stories about lack of communication results in all the common stuff. Oh, I'm not playing next year. You've ruined my love for the game. You've done this. You've done that. At the end of the day, I haven't done anything. I might have been honest and you don't like the answer you get. You might have communicated or you might have not communicated and not got an answer at all and assumed things. And it's not always going to go your way. And if you can't pick up those lessons, you're probably not playing the game for the right reasons, and it has nothing to do with the coach. And even if it does have something to do with the coach, then figure out how to communicate and get through the adversity.
Yeah,
You know, everybody loves adversity. Everybody loves talking about adversity until they actually go through it. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Who can
yeah,
I blame? I'm the victim. And we're talking extreme circumstances because I think a lot of players and coaches and parents and families do get through it and battle through it. But we all could look on social media or the news and see the instances where people don't. And that's why we're addressing this topic tonight. Did I go too far off topic?
no, I definitely agree. I think another big one I want to talk about when it comes to coaches is your attitude. Um, I think, coaches are people too, right? And they're making decisions. And as you get to a high level, it becomes, how is my team going to win, right? It's always personal and it's always about people because that's what life is. But at some point, I think you have to be honest with yourself about, okay, if I'm not playing, before I go piss and moan to my coach, do I deserve to play? Like, let me do a self reflection first. And I feel like that self reflection is missing a lot of the times. And we just decide to say, oh, well, screw them. I deserve to play. I can't believe they're doing this to me and all these things. Okay, well, self-reflect for a minute. See if they have any sort of reason that you could think of, that they would make that decision. Because sometimes there is one, and like you said, sometimes there doesn't seem to be. But I think that self-reflection piece is really important too, before we just start having a bad attitude, saying, I'm just going to disconnect from my team, from my coach, because they don't value me and all this. And we start filling in answers for ourselves. When really, when you play at the college level, or in high school, I've had coaches come up to me and say, hey, you know what? Susie over here is really good at hitting the rise ball, so she's going to hit today because it's a better matchup. Okay, right? Like there's almost, I don't want to say almost always, but sometimes there is a reason that you just can't see. So I think it's important to self-reflect, maintain a good attitude, and ask questions.
Yes, and I was writing some more notes down while you were talking. I think the most important thing is you have to take the approach where the coach is good no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I joke about two things that get me going is bad coaching and bad umpiring. I mean, we've
Yeah.
talked about my past with that. And two things happen. Umpires at the end of the day, whether they're good or bad, 99% of the time don't care who wins. They're just making the call based on what they think's right. And situations, close games, mistakes earlier compound, and then all that comes into your head, and then that you get to that point where it's game changing. Same with coaching. I You have to assume every coach is making a decision based on how do I win the game.
Yeah.
So when uh well, we already used Susie. When Stephanie
Yeah. Yeah.
strikes out for the third time with bases loaded, it's easy for uh, Lily's mom, we're pulling, to say, well, my daughter should have hit instead of Stephanie. Well, I don't think the coach was thinking of it that way. It was like Stephanie's done great in practice. She's really hitting. It's a game of failure to begin with. I'm going to go with my gut. Blah, blah, blah. I think we sometimes compare based on the situation instead
Yeah.
of understanding when a coach does what they're doing, they don't think something bad's going to happen. They're expecting the right
Yeah.
outcome to happen. And when that doesn't, there opens the box of second guessing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And whether there's good coaches or bad coaches, which there are, I think a player and a parent has to go with the perspective that the coach is really good.
Hmm.
Okay, it wasn't the decision I want. Now, how do I communicate and what's the perfect timing to communicate the issue? And then
Yeah.
over time, if a bunch of stuff doesn't align, well, now maybe we get into the fact they're not a good coach. But at the end of the day, you were empowered much more as an athlete than you
Yeah.
think to battle through that.
Yeah, and I think going to, like we mentioned, sometimes there are coaches out there who just aren't as strong, and we try to give them the benefit of the doubt, and we have problems with them. But I think you have to remember, even in situations like that, there's still things you can control. I mean, let's take a softball team, for example. If you show up to practice and you're like, ugh, coach is in a bad mood today. Okay, well, there's 20 of you and one of her. So who's going to set the tone? Make your choice, right? And I get that it comes from the top down, but there's a lot of power in numbers. And if you show up as a team and collectively decide that you're going to bring a certain energy to practice today or you're going to bring a certain work ethic, it's really hard for one person to bring that down if you're truly committed to it. Now, that being said, it's easier said than done, and I understand that the tone at the top sometimes sets all the way down, but I think you have to come in with the approach of every day is a new day. I get to decide what sort of environment I'm going to create today. And whether that's with a good coach, a bad coach, and that's just in life too. How am I going to show up to work today? How am I going to show up to my family today? How am I gonna, I don't know, volunteer today? Whatever you're doing, you show up and determine the environment that you create, not, oh, I'm gonna show up somewhere and I hope it's fun, or I hope that it's good.
So you're basically saying instead of setting expectations, you just set the environment for the moment and
Yeah,
then go with it. And if
yeah,
you start stacking those wins, probably you're going to get some good out of the situation. And again, has nothing to do. We're not talking playing time. We're not talking situations. I,
Mhm.
that
No,
stuff could be that stuff can be second guessed all day long.
and
How do
that
you get through the moment?
yeah, and I like to say too, as a coach, I tell my players, don't show up to practice today saying, "Oh, I hope Allie has something fun planned for us." We're gonna have planned what we have planned. That's up to you whether you want to make it fun or not, because there's 20 of you and there's two coaches, and to me the process is fun. I tell them all the time, I'm like, to me this is all fun. So what's fun to you is what's fun to you, and what's fun to me is what's fun to me. But you show up and you can make fun, or you can hope that I let you have fun. But there's a big difference in those two things. And I think it's the same way with a career someday of, oh, I hope I don't have a busy day at work today. Oh, I have a lot of meetings today. I can make a lot of connections, and the day will go by fast and I'm going to be productive. It's a total just how you show up to each environment that you're in.
I'm gonna put on a couple different hats now. As a parent, I've watched plenty of games. I mean, I've watched more games than I've coached. I mean,
Yeah.
and I can sit in the stands, and I mean, I'm an educator for 28 years, so I can see body language. And if you're a coach and you're letting certain players get away with body language that's not energetic and not setting the tone,
Yeah.
you're making yourself vulnerable for these types of conflicts, right?
Mhm.
And then at the same time, if you're a player, because I see it even in high school, if you're the one that shows up last minute every day and the team's running out when practice starts and you're still tying your shoes and you're the last one out there, not because of one day, because you had a dentist appointment or something, but every day, and then you're already setting the stage where you're lagging behind the team, that those two situations are priceless. Your body language, and then what, like again, what you said, controlling the energy when you start practice.
Mhm.
That's more important than any conversation you could have with a coach about playing time.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think another question you can ask yourself too is, okay, hypothetically, and this might be hard to do if you're a young kid, but once you get to high school, like, all right, if I was my coach, what type of player would I ideally want on my team, and how close am I to that player? Because am I creating problems or am I solving problems? Am I making my life easier for my coach and helping my team, or do I show up every day a thorn in their side of, oh boy, what's she gonna do today? Like, am I a constant that's gonna help lead my team, or am I a loose cannon that nobody knows how to talk to or control? So I think that's another good one too of how easy do I make the life of my coach? If everybody on my team was like me, would my coach be happy? Yes or no? And that's a very humbling question.
It's a very humbling question, especially everybody has different talent levels. Let's face it. Somebody can just be there, smile, go through the motions, but put effort in, and they're going to
Mhm.
play. And other people need to try three times as hard.
Mhm.
But if you take some self-reflection personally and think about what are you doing to help the team and to help your situation, and what if there were 16 or 20 of me, like you just said, how would we be? And I think you can get a lot of information out of that. And I don't, I think a lot of people are afraid to ask that question to themselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree too. And I think one more thing I want to chat about too is back to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning with timing is, and I feel like I can say this now as a coach, and I'm curious to your thoughts. I love when players ask questions because one, I know they're engaged, and two, I know that they want to learn. I don't know if you're confused or if you don't know what I'm saying unless you tell me.
Yep.
And honestly, I'm sure we've all heard this saying, if you have a question, somebody else in the room has a question. And I love the dialogue that that creates. And it makes me respect players too when they ask me a ton of questions like, hey, Allie, you said this earlier. Can you explain, what you mean by that? And we did a whole episode on the question, what do you mean by that? And I love that because you're engaged and you want to learn. And now other people are learning from the question that you asked. Now, that being said, if it's there's a time and a place to ask certain questions. Like you said, if it's the bottom of the seventh and you're sitting on the bench, it's not the time to go up to your coach and ask what's wrong with my swing. Cheer on your teammates in that moment. But I think practice is a great place when, when a coach says, anybody want to say anything in front of the team or anybody have a question, challenge yourself to step up and do it, because you're going to learn so much about yourselves and your teammates are going to learn more from you and your coach is going to respect you too.
Yeah, again, most high schools, I mean, well, at least the one I coach at, we don't have office hours. So I get to practice. I'm the first one there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to talk to me, show up and just say, Coach, can we chat? And we don't do it in the dugout in front of everybody. We go to the press box. We take a walk to the outfield and ask me anything you want, and just be prepared for an answer you might not like either. And at the same time, hold me accountable. If I said something in practice that's bothering you and then
Mm-hmm.
I didn't follow through with it, well, call me on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you're afraid to do that, I hope it's because you're unsure of yourself more than I create a culture where that's not acceptable. And
Yeah.
and every program's going to be different, but if you don't ask, you're never going to know what type of culture is out there. And just the timing and the communication has to happen
Yeah.
for a good experience. And I'm
I
not
just
talking at bats, results, none of that stuff, because none of that's guaranteed.
And I think too, at the asking questions things, again, this is called game of life. It goes for life, because think about it. If I'm a coach or a manager or a mentor or a parent, I have some interest in what you're doing, right? Like I'm invested to what you're doing, which means that when you ask me a question, I'm pretty passionate about the response and I want to help you for the most part. Like parent, coach, manager, mentor, whatever it is, like I know now, so I played softball and that's why I coach, because I want to help girls. So when you ask me questions, it helps me help you in the way that you need to be helped. So I think that's just so important for life too. And if you get comfortable with it from a young age of saying, hey, can you help me with this? Ask for help. Like it is such a good life skill to be able to ask for help or say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can we work on it today? Hey, I feel really good about this, but could I be doing this better? It's just such a good life skill and I can't say enough about it.
Well, the game isn't a person, right?
Mhm.
Sports aren't a person. They owe you nothing. Like
Yeah.
they literally can't give you any love back because they're not anything that can love. And
Yeah.
if you don't find those relationships through the people in your sport, then I don't even know what the point of playing is, because there's nothing fair about anything in athletics. But if you communicate well and build those relationships with players, the coaching staff, and even parents, that's where the love comes and the support and hopefully
Yeah.
the meaning behind what you're doing.
Yeah. Definitely.
So how do you sum it up at the end of the day? If someone's having problems player wise, I mean player or parent wise, because this is more for them, not necessarily coaches.
Hmm.
So what's the number one or two things they should do if they're experiencing issues and they need to talk to somebody?
I think one, self-reflect, right? Say, is anything about this situation something that I can control? Yes or no? And if the answer is no to about anything, then you probably didn't think hard enough, because we can always do something better in every situation. But that's number one. Number two, communicate. And that's a life thing too, right? Let's say I come to you with a problem and I'm mad about somebody and I'm, complaining about them. What's the first thing you're going to ask me? Well, did you talk to them yet? And if I say no, that makes my whole story incredible or not credible.
Right.
So I think just communicate with the person who you feel is stemming the problem, right? So who is in charge of, the situation, let me go talk to them and see if we can resolve it together. Ask them to be honest, be open and honest, but for that to happen you have to be vulnerable too, and you have to have the confidence to go ask. So I think self-reflection, communication, and I think just confidence too. Like be confident in what you're asking about, be confident in what you're talking about, and know that your sport isn't your identity, right? Sometimes you're going to get answers you don't want, but you have to be confident that you're going to get through whatever answer that you're given.
Yeah, and I'll end it with this, all those things, and then consistently practice that. So if
Yeah.
it's not the best day for a conversation or not the outcome or answer you wanted, if you're still reflecting and communicating and being confident every day, eventually you're going to stack more wins and losses and have a better experience. And again,
Yeah,
I can't tell you what defines a good experience for you, but you have to keep doing those things to define and have the experience that you're looking for. So,
definitely.
all right. Well, I hope that was a great topic tonight, by the way. So
Yeah.
I hope I satisfied you with what we talked about.
Yeah, I'll say so.
I mean, because we were perfect back in the day, so I don't even understand the
Right.
whole
No.
concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
All
Mm.
right. Hey, next week another guest, and again, thank you.